everybody, and welcome to Documentation Not Included, a tech industry podcast presented by DNI Stream, the live knowledge repository for software professionals. Our rebranding is going swell. It's Thursday, 7 p.m. British time. We're live on twitch.tv/DNI Stream. We promised some changes. We've been working hard at our rebranding, and we're rejigging. Are we also rebasing on prod? Because that would be cool.
No, I definitely never rebase on prod or master. Well, don't rebase from master at least, anyway.
So those of you watching us live here on Twitch, hi, or on YouTube, you'll be able to see our beautiful new branding. And these have been provided by one of our previous guests, Sarah from Firemain Studio. Massive hearts out to you. We love you. Well, she'll also be starting our development stream soon. So watch for announcements for those on Twitter or in our Discord. So let's get started. I'm Josey Howarth, which you can see by looking at my name. And as always, I am joined by the man with the sentient beard, my co-host, Chris Seabach.
Hello, Josey, and hello to everybody in chat. As always, we've got a few people again going at it. How do you like the new branding? Come on, tell us. Is it good? Do you like purple? Do you like yellow? We had yellow before.
We had it slightly orange. We were basically Halloween colored before.
Yeah, because so comments are always welcome, and they're always welcome for the branding. They're welcome all the way throughout the show. And if you've got any questions or anything, please do get involved. We are live. So before we get going, let's introduce our guest today. Our guest is Andy Morrell. Andy, hello. How are you doing?
Good evening. I'm doing well, actually. Busy day as always. So have a nice relaxing stream before probably doing my own later.
Oh, good stuff. Good stuff. So yeah, Andy is a streamer. Andy is a developer, and he's here to talk about Andy
stuff. We're here to talk about sort of how to sort of stay relevant in development. Because once we've finished formal education, or if we don't even go into formal education,
that's a
debate. We come out and we've got to last from 20, 21, 22 maybe until we're 70. And basically, how do you do that? And it's difficult, but we've all got to do it.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
and before we begin,
yes,
we have our icebreaker question. As always, Chris tries so hard to avoid these. He really, really does. But it's a very simple question. And in fact, it should remind you of your childhood ever so slightly. And this icebreaker question has nothing to do with development and has everything to do with being a kid at heart. So, what's your favorite dinosaur and why? And let us know when you're listening, or hit us up if you're listening to us on the podcast in the future at DNI Stream on Twitter.
It's always guests' honor for these, I'm afraid. So Andy, it's your go. you can go.
I'm going to go Triceratops.
Why?
Don't know, just cool. It's just like, who wouldn't want a big head and 3 horns?
And yeah, well, it's all for ramming, isn't it? The head. It's not even a head. It's just a big bone. It's a massive.
No, it's actually a really brittle bone.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. It's the whole skull, basically.
Right. Well, I've learned something today. Oh, for
me, we're here for.
For me, it would be. I'm going to go with, and I've forgotten the name of it, I'm going to go with the Mastodon. Because it's big.
Oh, well, that's okay. You can have the Mastodon.
It's big, woolly, and it's the name of it's the name of my favourite band as well, so.
Okay. I have to read out Tultepe's. Tultepe says, the dodo, the only true dinosaur.
The weakest link, basically, wasn't it? Let's be honest.
Well, to be fair, I mean, chickens, even today, if it's raining and chickens are outside, they look up, so it's possible for them to drown while standing outside. It's a thing. Well, see,
Jamie just said chicken because it's Velociraptor in disguise.
Yep. Whereas for me, I am going to go with a megalodon. Big shark, because I personally like the water. Although, God help me, Subnautica. God help me. I've quick side note. First time I played Subnautica, I already knew that the Reaper Leviathan existed. I already knew that all that stuff was there. However, I hadn't experienced it firsthand, and it came at me, and I destroyed a keyboard.
That's one of the reasons that I love that game so much. There's very little peril in it, but it's terrifying. The game is so atmospheric. Anyway, every time we talk about Subnautica, it's such a wonderful game. Anyway, right.
It just comes at you, sneaks up on you, doesn't it?
Yeah, have you seen the Ghost Leviathan, though?
No.
Oh, yes.
Oh.
Yes, I have.
They're not quite as scary, but that's death as soon as you see one of them. Game over, basically.
Yeah, that's a thing. But we're not a game podcast.
We should be.
Hey, Gordon
Not
says
yet.
pterodactyl, a flying dinosaur. What's not to like?
I would pterodactyl because how do you spell it? I know he spelt it correctly there, but how do you spell it? Pterodactyl. I don't know. Anyway,
The same way you spell
let's move on.
possum. Yes.
A possum, yeah. Okay, so I've actually not written a script for this part. Normally we have a little question that we ask our guests, so I'm going to wing it. I'm going to absolutely wing it. So, Andy, let's start with, how do you? What's your number one way of staying relevant these days? How do you? You're a developer. There's so much information out there. There's so many bits of tech out there. How do you remain on top of your game?
At the moment, I'm on quite a lot of lists that I can't mention.
I thought you were going to say drugs then. I'm on lots of drugs.
Not quite that either. So yeah, I'm on quite a few sort of distribution lists that I can't mention, but that's something else. But my top thing in the past 3 years has actually just been my streaming. And because I've been doing development streams, it's a case of, and they're 3 times a week usually. So it's literally just been going, okay, what am I going to do this week? And if you think about it, those little side projects over the past 3 years have just exponentially increased my knowledge in other little bits of the internet.
Would you say you've learned from your viewers as well? Have they been giving you feedback and saying, "Oh, you should try this," or "This is a solution to this kind of problem"?
Yes. So I think the main one is I've grabbed hold of Vue as my sort of go-to framework when it comes to web development. And I did try React. I've used React in my day job. I tried Angular. I wasn't quite a fan of it. But Vue, I just very much took a hold of, and it's just like very, very much my thing that I liked. And somebody just like, I think I had 4 recommendations at the time, and the other one began with an A, and I can never remember what the actual full name of it is.
What, a JavaScript framework beginning with 8?
But A that isn't Angular.
Oh, right. We'll have to leave that one with the audience. I can't
audience,
think.
go look this up for us.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how I do it now. And then, of course, with the start of this year, quite a lot of stuff has changed.
Well, in our industry, that is, I think, one of the consistents. Do you remember? I've been around for a long time, so I'm old. I admit this. But do you remember how long it used to take for updates for languages to come out?
The cadence was very disparate, put it that way. There was
It was a sort of peaceful sort of, oh, something new has come out. You have time to do things and use and upgrade and everything. Nowadays, it's almost like you are foot to the floor, full throttle. And if you go in for a job, like in our case, I think pretty much all of us are like freelance / run our own companies kind of a thing. You know, we're consultants and stuff. So for each of us, if we're pulled into a company and they're working in a particular framework and we're just sitting there going, God, there's like 3 versions after that already. Okay. Like it just seems daunting is a really good way to put it. Although I have to say, one of the beautiful things about live streaming coding is you get over being precious. This is something we've tried to stress, and as we're starting the new year, we're going into the new branding. I am going to almost stress this every episode. You can have no ego in coding. Not if you want to learn, not if you want to grow, and especially if you want to stay relevant. Because if you sit there and believe you know everything, sheesh.
You see, when I streamed, I did some stream coding myself a good while back now, a good few years back, and it was all game development, most of it anyway. And the problem I had is I was trying to get to a goal. I was trying to finish something, and I found that when I was streaming, I was learning loads. I was getting information off my my listeners and the people who were watching me, but it was really difficult to concentrate on the problem that I had, because I wasn't just learning new techniques and a new framework. I was working with Unity. I was struggling with the maths as well. So I was because it's completely different from enterprise development. You know, you have to work with vectors and dot products, and you know, it's not, to me, that bit was difficult. And when I have to think about these things, I have to turn everything off. Even music, I have to turn off and just think. Just think in silence. That's
sacrilege to me.
I'm sorry,
if I don't have music going, I can't actually focus, or like there has to be something going there. Although I have to say, for me, I've actually done the live programming as well back when I was doing the other show with for the game stuff, and I was coding a Twitch bot live on stream, and it was an interesting experience because I went in with an agenda of, I'm going to just sit here, listen, let the particular audience, you know, if they show up because they happen to see a random stream at a random time, so be it. I found that I got more done. However, I also structured in such a way where I said, hold that thought, let me finish this, let me get this out so I don't forget. A bit like what you expect to do if you're working in an office. Although if I am in an office and my headphones are on and you approach me, I'll turn into a hag or Medusa or something, and maybe I'll hiss at you like a vampire or something. I don't know. I'm not that evil. But then again, I don't work in other people's offices, so...
Yeah, so along that sort of front, over the sort of 3 years of doing it, I found things like, I know the other day we were talking about test-driven development within the Discord server. Now, that sort of goes out the window pretty much, and it's a case of viewers want instant gratification. Same as young developers, same as anything like that. It's the youth of today. They want instant gratification, and that's what you've got to give them. And so it's, your code may not look the prettiest, but it's got to work. And then you do the making it pretty, then you do the testing, and usually the testing just sort of happens off screen and off stream completely. But yeah, that's the sort of thing where you learn very, very quickly about a little bit of framework, because somebody goes, oh, hang on, it's not that, it's this. Or somebody comes in and goes, oh, what are you doing? Why did you pick C#? Why did you pick Vue? And you step back and then explain it to them. And this whole learning from the audience, teaching the audience helps you just go like that in terms of...
That's a key thing. It's a two-way process. It's when you're teaching, you learn to be concise. The one thing about this podcast is we don't necessarily teach, but we talk and we try and explain what we're talking about to people. We've got quite a few listeners who aren't in the same world as us, but they come and listen to us anyway. They're regulars, and some of them might not even be techies, but they come and listen to us, and they're interested in what we do. So we have to explain in a concise and as simple a way as possible what we do and how we do it and why it's important, you know. And that makes, I personally think that makes me better at all kinds of things: presentations, talks, just being with other people, you know.
I think in the end, teaching, period, is literally how you get good at something. You can sit there, and now I'm speaking as someone with a master's degree here. You know, you can spend all of your time studying theory and doing basic, you know, practice things and coming up with programs for your school, etc. You can do all of those little things, and it shows that you have a relatively good understanding of whatever the hell they tried to force feed you for your test so you could pass, or papers that you had to write, or theses you have to defend, however you look at it. But if you sit down and are able to explain to someone how to do something, why you've made the choice that you've made, and just see it through, it means so much more. I think the best piece of advice I ever got was from my academic advisor in my master's program, who said, be aware, you've now gone into the master's program, which means you've gone from the funnel of you work in computers and computer science and things, and you are now in this very tiny niche. There are going to be people who have no clue what you're saying or what you're talking about. And yet, to you, it just seems like common sense. And if you can get past that and break the jargon barrier and actually teach people the very basics, like, why is it that you separate a visual design from a layout design and say web development? Why is there a CSS? Why is there HTML? Why have those changes gone the way they've gone? What is all of this fancy framework stuff that has derived out of this thing called JavaScript? And why is it called JavaScript when there's an actual object-oriented programming language called Java? What the hell? Like, but being able to, for a moment, forget that all your knowledge is common sense for you and
but also
is brand new and fresh. It actually encourages me to research more.
I also like the
gain
fact
more
that people question me and ask me things that I don't know, and I have to find out. And sometimes I find out when I'm streaming or while I'm working or something to figure out, and that makes me better because they're asking questions that I'm maybe not thinking of. And this is kind of the argument for paired programming quite a lot of the time, isn't it? When people pair program, I've already said quite a number of times I'm not a particular fan of pair programming, but Josey and I are actually going to be doing some later on in this year, which is going to be interesting because we've never worked together in that way before, and I don't like pair programming, so let's see how that works out, eh?
Basically, you're going to be hearing about the end of DNI stream as a whole before it even got started, right?
So yeah, back onto like relevancy and sort of staying in that thing. We all know that in our career, unless we sort of, well, actually, this is the point. Not all of us know in our career that we should continue learning and continue keeping up to date with that stuff, because it's the whole pyramid thing. So you start off with 100 junior developer positions, which then end up being 60 developer positions, which end up being 30 seniors. Then you've got sort of tech leads and stuff like that. And it just ends up being like that. So you can't just move up the ladder to stay relevant.
No.
And you can't just become a managerial style role. You can't just do that sort of thing just to stay in work for 40 years.
But arguably, you become less relevant if you do that. If you become a manager, then you're not hands-on. You've got no reason to keep learning the tech
anymore.
Yeah.
So when that sort of thing sort of happens, you're like, well, actually, what can I do? And that's where things like classes weren't working for me, or I didn't do enough of them. And that's typically down to being a permie, and typically down to training budgets going out the window when you've got work to do.
Yeah, and I think that there are companies, when you talk about permie work and you talk about training programs, that there are companies that invest in that. There are companies that I know of, and some of my clients, they have, in fact, loads of companies, not just my clients, they have specific budgets and specific time set aside for their employees, 20% of the week or something. That is your learning time, regardless of what's going on in the real world. We've got support for that. We'll switch over to somebody else. They'll deal with that while you learn. It depends on the culture that a company sets for that. But it also depends on how much they feel or even are aware that that is something that developers need to remain stimulated and to stay relevant within the job.
Part of that actually, I think, comes from if in our cases, we bounce from project to project. We can literally bounce from framework to framework. We could bounce from app to app, which, in all honesty, because we run our own companies, because our livelihood depends on our being relevant, we're going to have our fingers in a lot of different pies with a lot of different knowledge that we can pull from to do whatever it is we're called in to do. However, if you work in a permie position, and let's just say that you're working on an app that is running on Java 6, will be running on Java 6 for the foreseeable future, it is incredibly hard to convince a company that you need to allow your people to
learn something else.
But
go somewhere else, or perhaps, heaven forbid, somebody come in and try and teach or try to offer another suggestion. I mean, we've joked about this before, Chris, so I'm going to bring
we've
up
had an
something we've
entire
read.
show about it. We've had an entire show about CV-driven development, which is what that is.
Well, no, that's not CV-driven development.
Well,
that's a company stuck, unwilling to mature, thus their employees are stagnant.
But I mean, employees wanting to learn Java 8 or Java 10. I don't even know what Java's on. I haven't touched it for decades. But you know what I mean?
I have installed it.
Wanting to learn the latest new framework or the newfangled thing to put it on the CV, which they don't necessarily want to do that because they want to leave. Developers want to be stimulated. They want to be interested and remain interested in the work that they're doing. That's the key here, is if you don't be scared of upgrade, of taking your employees to giving them classes and investing in them, because you're more likely to retain them if they do that. Otherwise, they're just going to go to the next place and, right, they're doing .NET Core 2.2 over there, so I'm going to go and play with that,
Yeah, so that's sort of what happened to me. It was just like, we had the allocated training budget, but no one ever used it. And I took the opportunity on that and just went, right, I'm just going to do this personal project. So I started game streaming in February 16. No, February 17, sorry. February 17, I started game streaming. And then I was like getting a couple of viewers, and I was only doing it because I had the computer to do it. And then I was like, well, okay, let's try development instead. And then did that, and very quickly it was learn this, learn the next thing, learn the next thing, and then all of a sudden it was whoosh, 3 years gone.
Would you say that's because you actually designated scheduled time to the learning process? Because there are a lot of people who are in the development world who, the moment they get home, are burned out. But there are also a number of people in the development world who, when they get home, the very first thing they do is, kick their shoes off into a corner, sit down at another computer, and spin up something, be it a game or an application they're working on, or like a friend of mine who likes to just randomly spin up servers and mess around with configuration files until things blow up. There are people who follow different methodologies for the things they want to do.
Yes. And the people that are coming home and being burnt out are probably the people you've got to find your niche and where your learning capacity is.
Well, you need to know how you learn best. Some people are kinetic and some are not.
The people that come home and sort of kick off their shoes and sit down at a machine and mess with AWS for a night, or mess with Azure or mess with something.
I've never done that. I've never ever done that. Neither has NS&W in chat with me at the exact same time. You can't prove it.
So if you come home, do that, or like myself, do the streaming, or I'm not sure what Chris does in his spare time. He probably just plays computer games.
I play with my beard constantly.
So those people are going to be sort of keeping relevancy, because what they can do is they can go, well, actually, I messed with AWS last week. This is what I've learned from that. And then you keep that going. And from the streaming sort of side of things, I kept that going. And I think that's where those people are going to stay relevant and stay learning. But if you're burnt out, you've got to find your different way of learning, because you're doing a day job and feeling burnt out as a dev. So how do you do that? Where do you get that? Do you read a book? Do you do something else that might be relevant or might be completely different, but may end up taking effect within your life? So
I learn during the job most of the time. I learn when I'm doing work, because just this week I've learned a ton of things about Azure DevOps, about Azure, because I know a fair amount about it already. I've worked in lots of different areas in Azure, but it's huge. It's absolutely massive. And there's no way in hell, unless I was exclusively dedicated to that all the time as an architect or designer or developer, that I would be able to learn all of that and retain the information because it moves so quick. The same goes for all the other cloud platforms. I've got fingers in all of those pies, but the way that I learn, when I want to learn something new, I've heard about something, for example, and I've used this before, Angular. I wanted to learn Angular. It is not. It was probably the wrong choice, thinking about how the market's gone now. React tends to be the most popular large framework, but as you said, Vue as well is popular. I decided to learn Angular by putting some personal projects together, doing my company website in Angular, redoing it completely in Angular, figuring out how to I do some cycling. I wrote a cycling related application that integrated with YouTube's API because I wanted to figure out how YouTube's API worked. Most of my work is API integration, so it's the same kind of thing most of the time, So they're all related, and once you've got a good grounding, you tend to not need to do as much outside work learning. But you still, to get into the nitty gritty and actually figure things out, the only way I can do it is by doing it. The only way I can figure things out is actually by getting my hands dirty and figuring it out. And I know that. I don't have time to put it aside. I make myself do it. I force myself to open a new project and
you crack your own whip, Chris.
And I am knee deep in documentation, knee deep in blogs, knee deep in figuring out what the best use cases and best practices are for something, because I don't just want to learn how to hack a website together. I want to learn how to put a website together. If you look at the DNI website, that I could easily have hacked together in anything. But I learned, I actually knew Angular when I did that, but I've put it together as an enterprise-grade application because that's how I need to put things together for my work. So it's overkill.
Well, you also handled SEO and the Angular issue of, that, which was it's an interesting exploration. But I noticed that we have some people saying some things, and I do believe, Andy, that you were going to make a comment on one of them. So I will let you take the lead.
Yeah, so NSN asked around about open source software and people needing to have an open profile or something that employers are looking for. And up until last year, I didn't. Most of my stuff was private.
I can't share half of the stuff I work on. NDA.
No, exactly. I still can't. So it's one of those things where, okay, public profiles are good, but they're not generally completely necessary. I think one of the things that I've always been good at is talking and sort of talking to people. There is a thing behind that, is because I was brought up in the hospitality industry. I lived in pubs from 0 until I was 18. And I went to university. So I sort of know how to talk to people who are random strangers who come to the bar.
Mm-hmm.
And that I'm not, you look at some developers and they are very sort of reclusive, not so open, may not be as talkative. And I think that's just a generalization of what developers are like. Like we like dark holes in a corner somewhere.
That's not true. I'm in love with my mind palace being set to energize right now. Thank you very much. Okay. Which is it's a new thing.
I would open
that cave.
I would open my curtains more often if I didn't have a south-facing window that glared on my screens constantly. That's the only reason I'm in a dark room.
There's a big difference between light and the evil day star. We do not discuss the evil day star here. That is a different thing altogether.
You mean there's an outside?
I'm sorry, but I've been out there and the graphics sucked, so it didn't work for me. But going back to further your comment, Andy, Gap Program, basically Jamie pointed out that you can use an open source portfolio as a way to negate the need for tech tests.
You can and you can't, though.
I think it entirely depends. If you are a permie, if you are someone who is looking to go into a job and sort of stay in a job, having some kind of visible, you have some skill set isn't going to prevent you from taking a tech test. If, however, you're a company that is coming in to work on a problem, you shouldn't even be taking a tech test to start.
It's not even relevant. But
But
the thing is that particular comment, I actually have tried to do that a number of times with clients or people that misunderstand the relationship slightly, but they want me to do a tech test because I'm going to be doing some programming for them on their systems, right? So they asked me to do this kata or something like that, or some kind of tech test. It's either on site or it's to do it at home in your own leisure and push to GitHub. And I said, well, I've got what you've asked for me to do a .NET Core and an Angular front end, really simple, kind of job. Here you go. Here's my open source GitHub repo for DNI. That is Angular and .NET Core backend, plus it's got Docker in there, plus it's got but they want to compare it against a benchmark of other people. They want to look at commits, they want to look at timestamps, and I mean, whether or not they look at this amount of detail is questionable, but it's also, I can do the job, what are you looking for? And they still don't accept it a lot of the time.
I think that's part of the problem. The hiring process forces people to prove that they know their stuff, because you're trying to prove to, we'll say 8 out of 10 times, someone who doesn't understand anything and all they're really doing is looking at a sheet kind of answer. That's not all the time, but that tends to be a case in sort of larger, big places and enterprises. However, when it comes to being the relevant side of things, it's almost like if you want to make more money, let's be blunt. In the end, you want to stay relevant because you want a paycheck, because you want a roof over your head, and because you want, a Tesla. Let's just throw that out there. You want a Tesla. So you obviously need a paycheck. And in order to keep a paycheck, you need to stay relevant for whatever your position is. Now, that could mean, like I said, you get really good at, Java 6.0. Like, you get really good at it, or you nailed down Red Hat 5. Like, that is your beast. Or F5s, as we were talking about in our Discord earlier. Or you need to go out exploring other frameworks or other languages, other tool sets, because sometimes it's not about the language, but about the tool set that you're using for that language that can also have an impact and teach you things as well.
I just wanted to. We're actually coming close to the end of the show. Weirdly, we've flown by. It doesn't look.
We're like 30 minutes away.
No, we've got 10 minutes left until we do. Until we do our closures. But I'm just thinking there's some other things here as well. So there's something relevant for people like us that specifically, if you're a permie and you work in an office with other people, and say you're in a massive company and you've got contractors coming and going and you've got new employees coming and going all the time, you're more likely to be on the cutting edge if it's a big company that takes that uses new technologies. It's always got new projects going and you get the option to use these new things. I've seen that in lots of big places.
I've seen that as well.
There's also
There's
also the stagnation side of thing where they're using the Java 6 and they shouldn't be. But then there are people like us that we don't have that luxury of working with and speaking to lots of people necessarily. So streaming is a really good way to do that and spread your knowledge and get information and learn by osmosis, essentially. There's also networking. I went to a few tech networking events last year. Only a handful. But every time I went, some geek there, and I say geek with the kindest possible way because I am one. They splurged at me about this new thing that they were playing with, and I'm kind of processing it and going, well, how does that fit into what I do? Is that relevant? Oh yeah, that's interesting. Oh cool, yeah. Oh, I'll go and have a look at that. And so I go off and have a dig. And I find that as a business owner, networking really helps me do that in the right events. If I go to a business networking thing, it's not the same. You don't get that kind of information. But if you go, I live up north, if I go into Manchester and do some, tech events, there's always somebody there that wants to share knowledge with me and tell me about the latest, greatest new AWS thing or anything, or new JavaScript framework that I've not heard of,
See, it's interesting you say that, because for me, it's not the networking side of things. Because of a lot of what I do, I'm constantly looking for ways to improve my process and my workflow. And that has that and my absolute love of adopting new technology and trying things out to see how it all interacts is a very large source. So, things like Reddit, some of the developer chat rooms, like our developer Discord. I'm also in a developer IRC. Yes, I still use IRC, people. Yes, it's still around. But it's the talking to people just in general or looking for solutions to a problem that I currently have. So, there's a couple of things that I'll potentially mention at the end of the show for the things that I have learned that I wanna educate people about. But I've only just recently found that I'm sitting there going, "Why is it that I only just learned about this now? This thing would have saved me, like, 4 years ago. Where were you all of my life?" But I tend to find that. And then the other side of how I try to stay relevant in my own right is I'll get an idea in the back of my head of there needs to be an app that does this. Why can't I find what I want? And then it starts me in the whole circle of I'm looking for it and I can't find it. So therefore, I'm going to build it or a variation of it. So that tends to be how I stay relevant along the lines of just listening to whatever my clients need and going, let me just verify the solution I'm thinking of is correct.
Hmm.
You know?
I think when it comes to like the whole story of staying relevant, mixing words today, is the willingness to learn. I think that's the whole point. And it was, I'm harking back to a conversation I had like at my Christmas do, believe it or not, 2 o'clock in the morning, absolutely out of it. But then we were talking about how do you employ remote developers and how do you know, or even internal developers or on-site ones, how do you know they can do the job? And if, say, for example, somebody comes to you and they said, oh, I've been in this position for 20 years. I've been doing Java 6 for that time. And you go, okay, so what have you learned? What are you likely to do? And because we're doing C# here, and he goes, well, actually, I've got this project, this is my open source software profile. You go, okay, that's great. If another guy comes to you and goes, yeah, I just know Java, you go, well, actually, this other guy has put himself miles ahead because he's willing to learn the next thing, willing to sort of even try it.
And we all know developers like that don't want to learn or don't necessarily think that they need to because they've had a 20-year job of doing VB6 or Java 6. And I've met fairly recently met people like that they don't care. They don't want to learn. When you come to them with new solutions to problems that they've had for their entire life, they don't care that there are new solutions, that there are better ways to do things and more efficient ways to do things. And this. They're stuck in the past. It works for them. Yeah, it works. Thumbs up. But sometimes it's not even just employees. Sometimes it's businesses that don't particularly want to move on because they've got a way of working and they feel that it's the right way to do it. And sometimes they also feel that they've got a unique situation, that they have solved problems within their business over the 20, 30 year span of their business that nobody else has solved. And it's like, well, you're doing it, for a better phrase, arse before tit. You know, you literally are. There are so many better ways.
Putting the cart before the horse, Chris.
It's a better way of doing it. Yeah.
We're learning.
We're just talking about
to be better phrased. We're learning to use.
I'm from up north. It don't matter.
Yeah. Going back to a comment that was said in chat by, and if I say your name wrong, I do apologize. But Avanash pointed out, as they've experienced, even after many years, tech tests cover only basic stuff. This actually leads to a situation that I saw. There's an individual I know, and I have to obfuscate everything. I do apologize. It's just the nature of the businesses that we live in. But there's this individual who spent years becoming very skilled in a particular niche of tech. And it was the type of thing where in their job, they were the ones responsible for they're the ones who write the Stack Exchange answers, basically, you know, the ones that get all the upvotes. They were like that. And they wanted to go somewhere else to look for a job. And the basic tech test that they had to take covered stuff that they hadn't touched in years simply because they've been so detail focused, and a company lost out on this individual because they put too much relevance on that and less on the actual conversation. And even now, a couple years later, the managers for that place are kind of kicking themselves in the rear end in the Watushi, if we want to get all proper and southern up in this place. They got kicked in the Watushi because they know they missed out on someone absolutely impressive. They lost out, and it's on them.
And I think, exactly that. And you can sort of have a guy that's sort of too advanced, and he's like, this doesn't even make sense, this tech test. This is like my boilerplate. I just can copy and paste that from somewhere else, because it's the same everywhere. It's used the same in all circumstances. It's like you look at .NET Core, for example, and sort of between like all the dependency injection stuff, and you can just go, yeah, copy and paste that section, done, for every single project that you do.
Yeah, to an extent, and that's the thing. It's like, I think sometimes I remember back in the day of classic ASP, I knew how to write an ADO connection to a database and create a record set and loop through it, and it's still up here, and I haven't written it for 20 years. I could probably do it in a notepad right now for you. I might use var instead of dim or whatever. I can't remember what the context is, but I would be able to write it, and I probably know the connection string off by heart as well, because I wrote it out so many times, and I don't think Control-C worked on my computer, on my keyboard. When
what are you talking about, Control-C, sweetie? It's right mouse button you should be using.
Oh, no. You're talking to someone who doesn't even have a toolbar enabled in Visual Studio. Yeah.
Why?
Not because everything's shortcuts. Resharper for the win.
Well,
anyway, right.
Yeah, I when it comes to the whole concept though of tech testing and trying to stay relevant, I think it is such a mixed bag. You have to figure out, like Andy said, you have to figure out your learning style. And in Chris's case, you've got to make time. You know, you have to be able to put the time aside to stay relevant. Sometimes that does mean arguing with your boss. Sometimes that means arguing with yourself. Sometimes that means arguing with, I don't know, what's the latest reality television show that's out there? I hate reality TV.
Sometimes it means arguing with your laziness as well. In my sense,
that's
a lot
why
of the time,
say yourself.
Because I'm I mean, it's not. Sometimes it's right. I've got to prioritize it over work. Which doesn't really happen. If I've got work in, that is the priority. But sometimes when I don't have work in and I'm comfortable and I don't, and this is unique to, I suppose, myself, but you don't, I'd rather spend the time relaxing and chilling out. As you said, as Andy said earlier, I play games a bit too much probably when I'm not working. I should probably be digging into things. But then again, years and years ago, I absolutely burned myself out, and the problem I have is that I start a project, I get learning, and I get really, really into it, and then every waking second gets ploughed into it, and then I burn myself out, and I know it's coming, I can feel it coming, and then I stop, and I don't touch anything for ages, and then I start writing blogs again, and I start streaming again, and I start getting into things, but I've learned these days to level it out, to time box things,
There is a cyclical nature to a lot of us. There really, really is. It's almost like we're our own planets revolving around the developer or a sysadmin sphere or what have you. I know for myself, I have to be very careful because if I also game, I also read. I read way too much, but I also work way too much. But I also play games way too much. I have a way too much balance is really the way my life works. But I will find myself in a situation, for example, a game that I'm currently absolutely obsessed with. I have discovered a need for a tool. And therefore, I am going to have to build that tool because we need it. It's like, oh boy. And poor Chris, he doesn't realize it, but this is one of the things that we will actually be building. But to be fair, a lot of the tools that are used for this game are built in frameworks like Java, or not Java, like Angular and other things like that. So all we're doing is jumping on the bandwagon of a lot of other tools. It's just the tools that I need ain't there yet.
I used to play a mobile game called Kingdoms of Camelot. Other mobile games are available, of course. And it was one of them.
Wow.
It was one of them. Like
Other object-oriented languages are available other than
I don't know if
Java.
you ever remember. There was a game. There was a game years ago. It was a browser game, and you could send ships off to Planetarium or something like that. It was called. You could send ships off to fight. It was one of the very first browser games, like sci-fi ones. Anyway, it was similar to that, but it's mobile, and it's like Kingdoms of Camelot. You've got castles, and you send them off to fight each other and things like that. There was a particular mechanic in this game that was you could upgrade your knights, and you needed a certain amount of coins or gems or whatever it was that you could earn in the game or you could buy to upgrade. And to be really efficient, you had to spend exactly the right amount, and then spend another amount that was just the enough amount to get to the next level. And there was a particular calculation that I figured out in my head, and I ended up writing. I ended up using packet sniffers to figure out what the JSON looked like. I ended up reading all of this.
The T's and C's?
It was fine. It was fine. There wasn't any T's and C's in that. Anyway, and I was picking out like information from the thing, and then I was figuring out how to do it. But I remember learning jQuery UI with that particular thing. At the time, it was relevant. It's very irrelevant now, but at the time, it was a tool that I used to actually learn a new framework, and that's how I learn. Exactly the same every time. There's a need, or I've got a need of some description, and I pick a framework up and I go with it. But that's just frameworks. There's a whole other host of things that I need to learn that I can't do that with. And I have to learn other ways.
Oh, look at you. Okay, so we're at the point now in our stream where it's time for us to do a BYOM. This is a bring your own manual. Each one of us is going to share a little thing from this week that we have learned. It could be development related, it could be not, that we hope to pass on to you that you might find interest in exploring in your own time, or perhaps learning more about and making use of in your own profession. So Chris, I'm going to pick you because you made Andy go first for the icebreaker, so I'm giving him a little bit of a break. Do you have anything at all that you have learned this week that you can share?
No, I haven't learned anything because I am perfect.
Well, we knew that already, but pretend for the rest of us mere mortals. Us muggles.
This week I reiterated, I'm in the process of writing lots and lots of documentation, proposals and impact assessments and things for a particular client. And I learned or relearned, and this happens almost every time I write a proposal, that scope, even when you're writing documentation, is extremely important. The proposal I've been writing is way too wide. And it's my fault and also the client's fault in that we haven't really dug down to what the actual problem is. They haven't thought about it enough, and I haven't asked all the right questions. I always think I do, but there's so much, and you start digging into things, and there's just more and more and more things. And it's just come down to the point where I'm thinking, we need to split this out. There needs to be specific sections of this proposal that we need to approach one by one. We can phase the whole thing in, but it needs to be scoped. And scope is extremely important in software. Scope creep is a massive thing. I wouldn't say it's creep in this instance, but the scope of the overall overarching document and project that will be spawned from it is extremely important. So yeah, that's my. Well, no, it's certainly not daunting. I don't find these things daunting, but it's just it needs to be managed for them more than anything. They need to be able to have piecemeal information to make decisions and decide which direction to go. And it said that's partly my fault that I haven't, actually, but I've identified it and passed that on. So,
Andy.
So, you two both know that at the start of the week, I am 4 days in now to my self-employment career.
We're so proud.
So you quickly learn how long to spend on things and how long to set aside for sort of the general business admin and meeting with meeting with your other employee, which happens to be my wife. So, and sort of trying to get that sort of underway, and that sort of thing sorted.
I
which is
just
interesting.
realized every single one of us in our company employs our spouses.
Well, okay.
Well, yeah, in my
Yeah.
case, it's an interesting concept. My point is, though, that they work with us, and that's
Mhm.
kind of cool.
Mine works for me. Let's be honest. Let's be truthful here.
Oh, see, mine works with me. I
Well,
can't let him work above me, and I can't let him work below me. He's got to be working with me. But yeah,
I mean, yeah, it's very much an employer-employee relationship, me and my wife. The way it has to work is just because of the nature of the work that she does for me. So, but yeah, other aspects, of course, that isn't the case. But in employment, but it's good to set those boundaries. And that's the thing is when you move into your own business, you realize that you have to set limits on. I mean, you can't spend forever getting a test right or writing a particular piece of code or doing your books. You have to spread it out and make sure that you prioritize properly, and you don't spend forever doing something that you think needs to be right. It just needs to be enough for now. You can come back to it later.
There's an argument for that, but go ahead, Andy.
Back to the partner thing. I was about to say, so who wears the trousers in your relationship? Because, well, streaming?
And here we turned off the mature warning for our audiences.
That wasn't actually that bad. Come on.
Darn it! But no, I understand what you're saying. There is that limitation, and you learn real quick. And I'm going to give you a piece of advice, that I wish had been given to me when I started my own company. Put aside a time every quarter to reevaluate not just your roadmap, but where you're at. And are you actually finding yourself overwhelmed? Are you taking on too many projects or not enough projects? Have an evaluation every 3 months. And if you have someone you can have that evaluation with, do so, because accountability can be very helpful. And if you are really good at looking yourself in the mirror and being able to be strict and stern with yourself without, either spiraling into imposter syndrome or, going off and lying to yourself because you don't want to admit that things are really bad, find someone else to bounce the idea off of. But be aware of things like GDPR, be aware of things like NDAs, which is why I like actually having my husband involved, because now when something really crazy goes on, every corner, we're just like, we're going to sit down and we're going to make certain we're exactly where we need to be. Are we at a point where we actually need to bring in yet another employee? Are we at a point where we need to get rid of that type of marketing, etc.? But that's my big advice for you.
The number one thing that I wish I knew when I first started, I know this isn't the section that we're doing, but why not?
Hey,
while we're all jumping
BYOM. You're learning. This is the point.
Is when I started contracting specifically. I ran a business before that as well, and then I went permanent for a bit. But the business, I didn't really have this problem because I had partners and employees, and I had people to do the relationship management. But relationship management as a contractor is a lot more important than most contractors put effort into. Basically, I wish all of the clients that I'd worked for, all of the engagements that I had, that I'd had better relationship management after the fact. I would have got repeat business from them. I would have maybe offered, every 3 months or whatever, offered them to see if they need any time of mine. These days I do it, and it pays dividends. People want to talk to me and want to re-engage me, but I never did it before. And it's a massive thing. It really is.
Yeah, for me, depending upon the client, there's ones I check in on every 3 months because of the type of client they are. But there are ones where I am sending out an email at the start of every month going, hey, I hope everything's going okay. I hope, what you were planning to do here was good and all that was there, just wanted to check in. That email usually responds with oh my God, thank you so much. I haven't had time to reach out to you yet. I need your help. And I'm like, cool. Let's get to business. Look at the brass tacks done. And you already know how I work. You already know how my rates work because you know where we're at. I already know what projects you have me working on. So let's just do this. Yeah. And it actually is a sped up onboarding and offboarding process.
There's another thing as well to that. If you keep in touch with your clients, let's say, for example, you're a typical contractor that goes into an office and works within a team, for a set period of time or whatever. If you keep in touch with the manager at that place. They're a permanent employee. Normally, their relationships aren't the first thing in their agenda. They need to do the work and deliver projects, right? If you keep in touch with that manager, you will hopefully get to know when that manager moves on. And it's the negative side of it, but it happens. And you may potentially be able to keep the relationship going with that company with the next manager that takes their place if you do it regularly. Even if they've got no work on, it's just about, it's relationship management. And I just wish I had. I really do, because I'd be in a much better position now. And it's only been the last 3 or 4 years that I've done it. And it's paying off, and it takes a year, 2 years sometimes for that to pay off. But it does. It does massively.
Yep. So the little piece of information that I'm going to bring from my BYOM, if you do anything involving servers, run an elk stack. End of story. So for those of you who are unaware of what an elk stack is, I run a lot of servers right now, and I need access to their logs for debugging sometimes. I do security audits, and part of my workflow, as Andy has been learning, is when you do your things take time. But part of my workflow is verifying and checking these logs and making certain everything's okay, making certain the log rotation is actually doing what log rotation should be. And well, I needed a solution, and the solution ended up being Elasticsearch with Logstash with the visualization through Kibana. It is free. You pay for the instance that you run it on. You can cluster it up really powerfully, really well. And you can have your little agents sitting and bringing all the logs in, and you can actually create fantastic dashboards that give you absolutely everything and anything that you need to know. So for those of you who are in that, do that, because elk is gorgeous at this moment in time. And S&W says, if you hate money, use Splunk. Is that hate or have money? Because that's two completely different terms. And I haven't looked at Splunk. I've only really explored both. Well, there you go. There you go. NS&W. Okay, so we're at the end of our show about tips and how do you stay relevant and learn to love the code. The obvious number one way to stay relevant is to listen to our podcast and to share our podcast with everybody.
Shameless. But I love it. I love it.
I'm being so cheeky. But yes, thank you to all of you guys on Twitch, including some names we haven't seen before. It is absolutely lovely to engage with you, and we love it. And for all of you listening in on a future podcast, we hope to see you live. Please be sure to like, subscribe, share, do all of the things. And finally, Andy, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed yourself.
Yes, it's been great. It's improving what because
words.
So feel free now, Andy, if you've got anything to pimp, anything like that. If you've got any projects, your company, anything like that, it's your time to shine.
So my social media is there. I think
well
that's
done.
the right way.
Well done.
There you go. That's my Twitter account. So go and follow me on there. But I'm Lucky Number 11 on Twitch or 11th Heaven on Twitch. One's my company account. One's my actual me account. And I run 11th Heaven, which is a company that is pretty much brand new. We started in July, but our first client is this streaming platform, which is Twitch. I know those of you on the podcast, I said this streaming platform. Sorry.
Everyone knows on the podcast.
It's not Apple.
My first client was Twitch, and that's how the company got started. And that is basically the culmination of the past 3 years. And that's basically what I'm pimping out, is the fact that keep learning, find your niche to keep learning. And because I've done it here, I've had massive opportunities, including like a nice little box there.
Oh, we can't quite see that, but
we can't quite see it. But that's got a trophy in from Microsoft, because that's got an MVP trophy in there. So that whole 3 years has just been absolutely mental. And learning's gone from here, where I was fairly stagnant. I'm not saying I was completely stagnant. I was just trying to find my niche, to that. And it was, and I think that's the whole point of this podcast. It's just gone exponentially upwards.
Good stuff, right? I mean, I said it's wonderful to hear a success story like that, especially, you know, on platforms like Twitch and anything that there's a lot of different ways to do this, and streaming isn't for everybody.
No,
but streaming is a way to improve yourself and improve your public speaking, and using a platform like this, you can make friends, you can learn, and
network.
We've created a great little community from this, and most of the people that we have in here, we also have in Discord, and it's just really nice. It's another thing that I wish I'd learned very early on in my contracting career is that people matter, not just for learning, but for keeping you sane, for having that catharsis. I mean, the RTFM channel in our Discord is crazy, and Andy's involved in it as well now, and he's getting involved. And there's
cycling yesterday.
And cycling. Yeah, where we found out that we've got something in common. It's just nice to have that. And even though we're not, we may meet at a conference at some point, but we don't know each other personally. But it's just nice to have it. And I just can't say enough for other people. As misanthropic as I've been throughout my life, it's just nice to finally be part of a community in this, in the dev world at least. Anyway.
I think that right there is the solution. It makes no difference how you do it. Be a part of some community. Now, the reason I say this is because Jamie brings up a point. Streaming certainly isn't as easy as you three folks make it seem. I used to do it myself. I'm going to go right out and say streaming is not easy. Don't think it's easy at all. It is an addendum. It is an additional function on top of an already back-breaking kind of experience. If you're scared of learning in front of people, or you have social skill type of things that kind of make you anxious or anxiety-ridden, there's also time, technology, getting it just right. It isn't that easy. I think it's the community. And I know for a fact that Jamie is heavily involved in several communities, and that might be one of the things that makes it work, because there are a lot of podcasts, and he runs one.
Indeed.
I'm just going to say one last note on the streaming lark. And this, I've never been able to put this any other way, is you've got to be a little bit of a narcissist.
Oh, absolutely.
What?
You've got to love yourself. You've got to love yourself.
Because your stream is about you. You have to be at least a little bit of a narcissist to be able to stream. There is no two ways about it.
The thing that comes with it as well, I mean, I don't particularly, I know we joke about my ego and my perfection and stuff on this podcast a lot.
Well, it's a joke, though. You're actually pretty down to earth.
That's the thing is, I am absolutely perfect, and there's nothing wrong with me. And I could do this on my own. I don't need anybody else to do it. But no, the point is that this helped me become a better person and speak better. And I still fumble around my words, and I'm not perfect, but it's just, as I said, it's just nice to have it. It really is, and it's lovely to see people talking and chatting and engaging and giving us feedback and getting involved. But anyway, so let's actually close the show, because we were kind of in the middle of it.
You're at your script. We have a lovely script that's all rewritten and everything. We're at your section. So
yes, you can also get in touch with us, follow us, see any of our podcasting platforms, our YouTube links, our Discord links if you're a developer and you want to come into a Discord server that's full of other developers or software and IT professionals.
We have sysadmins as well.
And I said IT professionals. You can come onto our website, which is www.dnistream.live. We are in the process of rebranding that. It doesn't quite match everything we've got going on Twitch at the moment, but it will do soon. And in fact, we will soon be doing some streaming to improve that website, Josey and I.
Yes.
You can also use it to contact us for any reason. If you've got any suggestions for topics on the show, you want to be a guest on the show, you want to come on and improve your own self-esteem and see how streaming is done, come along, set a topic, and we'll talk about it, as long as it's within the realms of the IT world, of course. But yeah, that's it from us, isn't it?
Oddly enough, Chris, in all of that rambling, I think you covered everything. And this is why we have a script, right?
Yes.
But yes, we hope to see you all next week, Thursday, 7 p.m. UK time, twitch.tv/DNI stream. If not, we'll catch you on the digital download side of the podcasts out there, since we're literally everywhere. Don't forget, we do have a YouTube channel if you want to subscribe.
Don't bother.
Yeah, but all that's left to say is a goodbye from our guest, Andy.
Goodbye.
A goodbye from my co-host with the epic sentient beard, Chris.
All right. See you later.
And goodbye from me. See you all later.
Bye.
Bye.